Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where the shadows seem thicker, the air heavier with old perfume, and even your heartbeat sounds like it's echoing off marble columns and ancient walls. You find yourself wandering a narrow street in a city you can't quite place. Could be could be Rome, or maybe it's Cairo, because the way the torches flicker and the market smells of frankincense, rosewater, and something suspiciously like feet, you know you're definitely not in Kansas. Your hand brushes against a stone wall worn smooth by centuries of silk sleeves and linen tunics. You pass a bronze mirror, catch a glimpse of yourself, and realise you're decked out in a get-up that would make your high school yearbook photo look positively tame, beads clacking at your neck, kohl smudged expertly around your eyes, and a belt that seems designed more for ritual than for. Holding up your pants. There's a man passing, his beard waxed into little curls, wrapped in a toga that looks like it's seen more political intrigue than your entire Instagram feed. Nearby, a woman's headdress towers above her like she's smuggling fruit or secrets, her sandals laced up past her knees, and you can't help but notice she's staring right back at you, judging your posture maybe, or your obvious discomfort in these clothes. A merchant offers you pomegranate seeds and insists they'll make your lips redder, your luck better, and your prospects in love considerably less hopeless. You take them, of course, because who can resist the pitch? Besides, the merchant's rings glitter in the firelight, and you get the sense they might know exactly what happened behind the closed doors of the ziggurat last night. Here's your one reality check. If you were actually here, walking the torchlit streets of Babylon or Athens, you probably wouldn't survive the night. Not with your shoes, not with your haircut, and definitely not with that modern attitude. Out here, fashion is armour, status, a kind of social GPS. Wear the wrong thing, and you risk everything. So, before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 am? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on Timeless Sleep. You push onward through the crowd, noticing how everyone seems locked in a silent competition to outdo one another. Every colour, every thread is a signal. In Mesopotamia, the purple dye in someone's robe could bankrupt a small village, but it would also let everyone know that they're just a little closer to the king, or at least hope you think so. Children scamper by in amulets shaped like fish, meant to ward off evil eyes and nosy neighbours alike. Somewhere a priest splashes oil on a statue, his robe's embroidery so intricate it could double as a map. If you looked closely, you might spot a symbol stitched there that marks him as a servant of Ishtar, and not the sun god Shamash. Wearing the wrong symbol isn't just a faux pas, it's a cosmic blunder, one that could haunt your family for generations. As you shuffle forward, a cool breeze cuts through the hot press of bodies. You catch a whisper about last week's scandal, a woman seen in public with her hair uncovered. Some call it bold, others blasphemy, but everyone's talking. Here, what you wear is more than fashion. It's a language. The Romans strut by, their togas arranged just so, folds sharp enough to slice. If your toga slips, your honour does too. There are rules, layers and knots that only insiders understand. There's always one guy who ties his in a way that hints he's secretly angling for higher office, or, worse, trying to pass as a senator when he's really just good at laundry. At the edge of the forum, you spot a small, tight cluster of young people. They're all in the newest style, tunics scandalously short, gold thread gleaming at the collar. The old guard glares from under heavy eyebrows, muttering about the youth today, but you notice how even they tug their sleeves down a bit, wishing maybe for a little gold thread of their own. A few paces away, a gladiator lumbers past, the scars on his legs barely visible under the silk bands. and you realise that in this world, even battle wounds become part of your ensemble. There's no such thing as a purely practical garment. Everything's an advertisement, an ambition or a warning. You weave between a pair of merchants arguing over who has the better batch of Tyrian purple, and it's only when they both spot a noblewoman with her slaves trailing behind, her dress so stiff with pearls it probably stands up by itself, that the argument dies. Everyone bows their heads, but you see the way eyes flicker, taking mental notes for the next family gathering. Above, on a balcony, a flute player in a crimson robe, illegal for most, reserved for the priesthood, fills the air with a melody that sticks to your bones. Every time the wind shifts, you catch a new scent, cinnamon, wool, fresh fish, and something sweet, almost cloying, from the alleyway bakeries. You realise this isn't just a fashion show, it's survival. The wrong hem length could have the city guards questioning your status, and the wrong colour could see you dragged before the magistrate. Farther along, you slip through an archway into the Egyptian quarter. The sun beats down even at dusk, and the crowd here glows with golden jewellery and linen so sheer it's like wearing a breeze. You envy them until you notice a group huddled around a pot of something steaming, eyeliner they say, made from ground-up galena. They dab at their faces, sharing tips, laughing quietly, while a priestess explains that a thick line protects against both sun glare and the curse of jealous spirits. Overhead, the carved eyes of Horus stare down, eternal, and you understand that here, the gods are fashion critics too. Children dart through your path, their cheeks streaked with ochre and their wrists jangling with blue glass beads. A mother scolds her son for smudging his coal, then fusses over his new amulet, making sure it's displayed just so, because if it isn't, a neighbour might gossip. Or worse, blame her when the next sandstorm rolls in. You try not to laugh, but it's hard when you realise that some things never change. Even 3,000 years ago, people were desperate to keep up with their neighbours, terrified of being left out or left behind. You move with the crowd, always watching, always learning. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of something shocking. A man in a woman's headscarf, a woman wearing men's sandals, or a child in a mask shaped like a falcon. Each one is a tiny rebellion, a quiet dare, or maybe a bit of mischief before the grown-ups catch on. You realise that every society has its rule breakers and its rule makers, and the line between the two is thin as a thread of silk. A hush falls as the procession approaches. You step back as city officials glide past, their capes starched and stiff, trailing attendants who sprinkle flower petals with the solemnity of a sacred rite. The crowd presses forward, eager for a glimpse, and suddenly you're caught in a swirl of colour and sound, every eye sparkling with a mix of envy, admiration and calculation. This is more than fashion, it's magic, politics, religion and the weight of generations, all stitched together. As the crowd thins, you find yourself beside a faded mosaic, its tiles chipped, but still gleaming in the lamplight. You trace the patterns with your fingers, feeling the pulse of history, how every civilization, from Babylon to Rome to Thebes, has used clothing to tell its story, hide its fears, and declare its hopes. The wind picks up again, tugging at your sleeve, and you wonder what stories your own clothes might tell if you let them. You keep walking, each step drawing you deeper into the heart of the night, through bazaars and back streets, where the boundaries between costume and identity blur. A group of musicians tunes up in a corner, their instruments as battered as their shoes, but their laughter is bright, sharp, and utterly fearless. Somewhere nearby, a fortune teller reads a stranger's fate in the weave of a scarf. And just when you think you might finally blend in, someone hands you a garland of flowers, tells you it brings luck, and winks, making you wonder if you're being welcomed, initiated, or just marked for the next great story. As you fade into the crowd, the city seems to sigh around you, alive with secrets, beauty, and danger. You pull your borrowed cloak a little tighter, feeling both exposed and protected, and realise that in this ancient dazzling world, You're part of something bigger than yourself. A tapestry of hope, ambition and survival, stitched together one outrageous outfit at a time. You drift forward without noticing the moment the street narrows and the air cools, as if the city itself is guiding you somewhere quieter, more private. The noise of the marketplace fades into a distant murmur, replaced by the soft scrape of sandals on stone and the hush of voices trained not to carry. Ahead, a palace rises from the darkness, its walls pale and smooth, catching moonlight like still water. You don't question how you pass through the gates. In places like this, questions are rarely welcome, and curiosity is something you learn to wear carefully, like a borrowed ring that doesn't quite fit. Inside, the corridors stretch long and echoing, lined with painted reliefs of weddings that look nothing like the ones you know. Couples stand stiff and formal, hands barely touching, eyes fixed forward rather than on each other. You pause before one carving where the bride is clearly a child, her feet not even reaching the ground, her hair arranged in an elaborate style, meant to make her seem older, heavier, more substantial than she really is. Servants hover around her, adjusting jewellery that seems almost comically oversized, layers of gold and stone meant to announce something louder than her small voice ever could. You follow the sound of murmured negotiations into a side chamber where men sit in a loose circle, their robes heavy, their fingers busy with cups, scrolls and signet rings. Marriage here isn't whispered about in terms of love or compatibility. It's spoken of like land, like grain, like alliances that must be secured before the next drought or war. A father clears his throat and names the lineage of his daughter the way someone might list the features of a prized horse. Another man nods, calculating, already thinking 3 generations ahead. Somewhere beyond the walls, the bride herself waits, likely unaware of the precise terms being agreed upon in her name. You sense how normalized this all feels to them. Across civilizations, royal and noble marriages are treated as tools, instruments designed to bind families, secure borders, and silence rivals. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs often married within their own bloodline, believing divine power was something best kept pure and close. In royal courts from Mesopotamia to Europe, cousins became spouses, siblings became partners, and family trees folded inward on themselves until the lines blurred. It's strange, unsettling, but no one here flinches. To them, this is simply how the world stays balanced. As you move deeper into the palace, you glimpse the other side of these arrangements. In a candlelit room, a young queen sits alone, her wedding garments folded neatly beside her. The fabric is exquisite, linen so fine it seems spun from air, embroidery catching the light with every small movement, but her hands tremble slightly as she smooths a crease that doesn't need smoothing. She's been taught how to stand, how to speak, how to smile, just enough. No one has taught her how to want. Her marriage is tomorrow, and while the court celebrates, she counts the hours like beads slipping through her fingers. Elsewhere, celebration fills the halls. Courtiers laugh softly, musicians tune their instruments, and trays of food are prepared for a feast that will last until dawn. You pass a group of relatives, debating the seating arrangements with more intensity than you've ever seen applied to matters of the heart. Who sits closest to the couple matters. Who pours the wine matters. Every detail is a performance, designed to communicate stability and power to anyone watching closely enough. You step into a grand hall where a wedding ceremony is already underway. The groom stands tall, practiced in public appearances, his expression carefully neutral. His bride approaches, veiled and radiant, guided by attendants who keep her from stumbling under the weight of her garments. They do not look at each other. Instead, they look toward the priest, the altar, the witnesses. This union is not about two people discovering something new together. It is about confirming something old, something agreed upon long before either of them had a say. Your mind drifts briefly to how marriage works where you come from, how it's supposed to be built on choice, affection, shared dreams. Then you remember that even in your world, echoes of these older systems remain. Last names passed down, expectations inherited, subtle pressures disguised as tradition. The difference is often just how openly it's acknowledged. The ceremony ends with formal gestures rather than kisses. Applause ripples through the hall, polite and restrained. Gifts are presented: gold, land deeds, symbolic items meant to represent fertility and prosperity. No one asks the couple how they feel. The question would seem irrelevant, maybe even inappropriate. Feeling is private. Duty is public. Later, in a quieter wing of the palace, you overhear a hushed conversation between two older women. They speak of marriages past, of sisters sent away to foreign courts, of daughters who never returned. One woman adjusts her shawl and says softly that at least this marriage keeps the girl close to home. The other nods, eyes distant, and replies that sometimes closeness is its own kind of prison. Their voices drop as footsteps approach, and the moment dissolves back into silence. You wander onward, crossing centuries as easily as hallways. In medieval Europe, you find yourself in a cold stone castle where banners hang heavy with family crests. A young nobleman stands at a window, staring out at mist-covered fields he will one day inherit. He's been told since childhood who he will marry, what lands she will bring, how many sons they are expected to produce. He knows her name but little else. His armour hangs nearby, polished and ready, because marriage here is just another campaign, another obligation layered onto a life already mapped out. In another chamber, his future wife is being fitted into a gown stiff with brocade. Women fuss around her, tightening laces, adjusting sleeves, offering advice that sounds more like instructions for endurance than affection. She listens quietly, committing each word to memory. Survival, she understands, will depend on how well she performs her role. Love may or may not come later. It's not something she's been encouraged to plan for. You notice how often silence follows these unions. Silence from brides whose opinions were never requested. Silence from grooms taught to suppress doubt in favour of duty. Silence from families who benefited politically while privately mourning what was lost. These marriages succeed on paper, treaties signed, bloodlines continued, but the human cost lingers in rooms like this, in glances exchanged behind fans and doors closed just a little too firmly. Not all marriages are quiet, though. In some courts, spectacle reigns. You pass through a hall blazing with candles where a wedding is staged to impress foreign ambassadors. The couple wears garments so extravagant they can barely move, layers of symbolism woven into every thread. The message is clear. This family is wealthy, powerful, untouchable. The marriage itself is secondary to the image it projects. When the couple retreats afterward, exhaustion weighs heavier than joy. You begin to sense a pattern, one that stretches across cultures and centuries. Marriage, especially among the powerful, is rarely about two people choosing each other. It's about maintaining order in a fragile world, about locking pieces into place so the structure doesn't collapse. Fashion plays its part too, disguising fear as splendour, control as ceremony. The richer the fabric, the less room there seems to be for spontaneity. As night deepens, the palace corridors empty. Servants extinguish candles one by one, and the echoes grow longer, lonelier. You pause near a balcony overlooking a courtyard, where the newly married couple stands briefly together, separated by only a small distance that feels immense. They exchange a few formal words, rehearsed and safe, before attendants usher them away in opposite directions. The moment passes quickly, but it stays with you, a quiet reminder that not all unions are meant to be understood from the outside. You continue walking, carrying these images with you, the weight of crowns, the stiffness of silk, the careful choreography of lives bound together for reasons far removed from affection. The city beyond the palace walls hums on, indifferent and alive, while inside, history settles into place, one marriage at a time. You move forward into the dark, aware that what you've seen is only the beginning of how deeply fashion and marriage have shaped, constrained, and complicated human lives across civilizations. You follow a narrow, winding path that leads away from the palace and into a neighbourhood where the clatter of daily life resumes, sharper now after the muffled splendour of the royal halls. Here, fashion reveals its other side, not just symbols of power or tools of alliance, but instruments of pure, unfiltered discomfort. You find yourself among rows of cobblers, their stalls packed with shoes of every shape and cruelty, from the dainty to the brutal. The scent of leather mingles with the smell of boiled herbs and glue, a blend that sticks in your nostrils as you wander between their displays. Someone presses a pair of tiny, ornate slippers into your hands, marvelling at your fortunate feet, unmarked by the discipline required to fit into such marvels. These are lotus shoes, painstakingly stitched and embroidered in jewel tones, designed not for walking but for reshaping. You're told that, for centuries in China, the perfect foot should never exceed 3 inches. The process starts young, bones broken and reformed, the pain unspoken but ever present. You can only imagine the quiet pride and private agony as young girls grew into women whose steps were measured, deliberate, and permanently altered. Among the market chatter, you spot a woman whose gait is unmistakable, slow, swaying, each step testimony to the price of beauty in her world. Elsewhere in the crowd, men try on boots capped with metal, their soles thick and heavy. These aren't just for protection. In medieval Europe, iron-capped shoes might be worn to signal readiness for conflict, the clink and ring of steel on cobblestone as much a warning as any drawn sword. You watch a young apprentice testing a new pair, the unfamiliar weight making his steps awkward. Each movement a reminder that some fashions are designed to leave their mark long after they're outgrown. Your eye is drawn to a tall figure gliding through the square on impossibly high platform shoes, chopines they're called, rising sometimes as high as 2 feet above the ground. In Venice, you learn, these towering shoes were once essential for noblewomen, elevating them above street filth and the common crowd. Attendants hovered nearby, ready to catch a misstep or a fainting spell. The risk of a twisted ankle or an undignified tumble was high, but the status afforded by such peril made the danger not just acceptable, but enviable. Fashion here is a tightrope, and everyone is expected to keep their balance. A cobbler waves you over, offering to measure your feet for a new pair of shoes. The tools he uses are both delicate and menacing, resembling surgical instruments more than anything designed for comfort. He boasts of the latest Parisian styles, pointed toes so sharp they could catch on a hem or a heart, and heels designed to alter posture, add height, and perhaps introduce a permanent limp. You recall the stories whispered about the French court, where red-soled heels were the mark of privilege, and where walking, for some, became an exercise in calculated misery. Nearby, a group of women debate the merits of different fabrics and insoles, trading advice with the seriousness of generals discussing a campaign. One laments the blisters from her new pair, another shares a secret mixture of vinegar and herbs meant to soften leather and skin alike. Their camaraderie is genuine, but underneath is the silent understanding that appearance often trumps comfort, and that pain, if invisible, is easily dismissed as weakness or failure to try hard enough. You pause at a stall where children practice lacing up their shoes with ribbons, so fine they could unravel in a breeze. The youngest girl tries to imitate her older sister, wobbling on borrowed platforms and grinning with pride when she manages a single unassisted step. Her mother looks on, pride and worry mixed in equal measure, knowing that mastery of these little tortures is a rite of passage, one that will shape the child's future as surely as any lesson in etiquette or language. You find yourself drawn to a quiet alcove where shoes are offered not for fashion, but for function. Sandals made of reeds, simple and sturdy, bear the wear of countless days in the fields. The owner, a broad-shouldered man with hands like tree roots, offers you a seat and a cup of barley water. He gestures at his shoes, battered but whole, and tells you that for some, survival depends less on appearance than on durability. He chuckles at the folly of pointed toes and sky-high platforms, but you see the way his gaze lingers on a passing noblewoman's slippers, equal parts disdain and envy. The conversation turns to local customs, and you listen as people debate the merits of bare feet versus bound feet, of boots for battle or for display. In some places, you learn, shoes are a luxury reserved for the rich, and bare soles a mark of either poverty or piety. In others, the right shoes might grant access to forbidden places, or spare you a beating from a guard who recognises your rank by the quality of your footwear. As evening falls, lanterns flicker to life above the stalls, casting long shadows and highlighting the colours of silk, leather and brocade. Musicians strike up a slow tune, and you watch as dancers circle the square, their shoes tapping out rhythms that speak of joy, fatigue, and sometimes rebellion. Every step, every stumble, is a statement of endurance, ambition, longing, and the unspoken hope that the pain is somehow worth it. You are handed a pair of new shoes, soft, unfamiliar, stitched with a symbol you don't recognise. You slip them on and join the dancers, your feet moving awkwardly at first, then finding the rhythm. The shoes pinch, the straps dig in, but you keep going, swept up in the music, the lights, the sheer absurdity of it all. For a moment, you understand why people have endured so much for fashion, the promise of transformation, the allure of belonging, the simple joy of being seen. As the song ends and the dancers disperse, you sit on a low wall, massaging your aching feet and watching the city settle into night. The market grows quiet, the last cobblers pack up their wares, and you wonder what stories your own shoes might tell, of journeys begun, roads abandoned, places reached against all odds. You realise that fashion, for all its strangeness and cruelty, is also a record of human stubbornness, the desire to move forward even when every step hurts. You close your eyes, listening to the distant sound of footsteps fading into the darkness, and let the aches and memories drift away. Tomorrow, the market will bustle again, new styles will emerge, and someone, somewhere, will put on a pair of shoes and walk a little taller, or a little stranger than before. The streets grow quieter as you leave the bustle of the shoe market behind, entering an avenue lined with small shops and shadowy alcoves. Here, the air is thick with incense, and candles flicker in bowls of polished brass. The faces you pass are painted, powdered, and sometimes almost mask-like, each a living canvas upon which the ideals and anxieties of an era are drawn. You realise that fashion is not content to torment only the body, it also wages war on the face, the hair, the skin. Each generation invents its own battleground, and you are about to cross more than one. You drift toward a wide, shallow pool, its surface scattered with petals and shimmering with the soft glow of floating lamps. Women kneel at the edge, dabbing at their faces with cloths soaked in mixtures of vinegar, honey, and ground chalk. Their voices rise and fall in a litany of advice and warnings. Too much powder and your skin will crack. Too little and every imperfection will show beneath the harsh light of the public baths. Nearby, a young man leans in close to his reflection, carefully sculpting his beard with a razor so sharp it leaves a line of crimson if his hand slips. In ancient Rome, you learn, the contest for the perfect appearance was unending. Women applied face creams made from ingredients as varied as crocodile dung and powdered pearls. Ointments promised to erase wrinkles or smooth scars, and those with means could summon slaves whose sole task was to apply and reapply the delicate layers required for public life. Even the men joined in, plucking their beards, polishing their nails, and using pumice stones to erase the traces of age or labour. You are offered a bowl of lead-white powder, the favourite of fashionable faces from the Roman Empire to Elizabethan England. The effect is immediate and chilling, your skin glows, but every breath comes tinged with something heavy, almost metallic. Those who wear this mask too often begin to feel its price, headaches, fatigue, and, over time, an unplaceable sadness that seeps beneath the surface. Yet, the allure is strong. In candlelight, the face of the one beside you looks almost ethereal, perfect, ageless, a small victory against the relentless march of time. Next to you, a woman plucks her eyebrows with the split edge of a seashell, her face set with determination. She explains that in her grandmother's time, women prized thick brows, while her own generation demands the thinnest possible line, a fashion that changes with the whims of the court or the favour of a single royal mistress. Beauty is a pendulum, she sighs, and everyone learns to swing with it, or risk falling behind. Further along, you enter a shop filled with wigs piled high as cushions, their curls powdered and perfumed until each one looks almost edible. You remember that in 18th century France, an elaborate wig could signal wealth, status, or simply the hope of distracting from less fortunate features. These towering confections required hours of preparation and a team of servants to assemble and maintain. The secret, one attendant whispers, is not only in the hairpieces themselves, but in the clever pads, wires and cages hidden beneath, an architecture of deception and desire. At the far end of the shop, a group of men debate the merits of different beard styles, tracing the legacy of kings and philosophers whose facial hair set the tone for entire generations. Some wax their beards into sharp points, others let them billow like storm clouds. Each style is both a badge and a shield, projecting wisdom, strength, or even dangerous eccentricity. The wrong beard could mark you as an outsider, a fool, or worse, an enemy. You pause beside a young girl who has been given a tiny jar of crimson pigment. Her mother shows her how to stain her lips, warning her not to smile too wide until it dries. The colour is made from crushed beetles, an ingredient so precious that traders guard it as carefully as gold. The girl's eyes widen with excitement, and you realise that for her, the ritual of painting her face is as much about belonging as it is about beauty. Outside, the evening brings a new procession. Nobles on their way to a masked ball, their faces hidden behind layers of velvet and lacquer. Each mask is a masterpiece, carved and painted to exaggerate features, to hint at hidden desires, to provoke laughter or fear. The guests move through the lamplight like ghosts, unrecognisable to one another, safe for a few hours from the tyranny of being truly seen. You find yourself drawn to a quieter corner, where older women sit and reminisce about fashions past. They remember when a touch of sunburn meant good health, when a gap in the teeth was a sign of luck, when hair was powdered blue or green to imitate the plumage of exotic birds. Some of their memories are fond, others tinged with regret. One admits that she once tried to bleach her skin with sour milk and nearly lost her eyesight. Another confesses to sleeping upright for months so her wig would keep its shape. There are secrets everywhere, recipes for beauty passed from mother to daughter, tricks for making eyes seem larger, cheeks rounder, lips fuller. A few of the tips seem almost magical, as if belief itself is part of the transformation. Yet you sense a sadness beneath the laughter, a quiet acknowledgement that much of this effort is spent hiding, correcting, perfecting what nature has given. You drift once more through the crowd, passing men and women whose faces gleam with oil, powder and hope. Some are young and fresh, eager to try every new invention, others carry the marks of a lifetime spent chasing an ever-shifting ideal. The night grows cooler, the city settles, and you are left to wonder how many lives have been shaped, bent, even broken, by the search for beauty that is never quite within reach. As you return to the avenue where your journey began, you catch sight of your own reflection in a polished shield. For a moment, you hardly recognise yourself. The unfamiliar brows, the pale skin, the darkened eyes stare back, and you realise how easily a face can become a mask, and how difficult it is to remember what lies beneath. You walk on, the traces of powder and paint slowly fading as you move deeper into the night, leaving behind a world where every surface is curated, every feature judged, and where the cost of standing out or fitting in is measured not just in coin, but in hours, effort, and sometimes the simple price of one's health. The avenue narrows once again, guiding you toward a place where the city's business is no longer about trade or spectacle, but about the private deals that shape entire destinies. The air carries a new tension, a hush just beneath the surface, as you pass doorways painted in bright colours and hung with ribbons, signs that a wedding or a betrothal is being negotiated inside. Here, marriage is not just a rite, but a marketplace, and you become aware that love, for most, is a matter of haggling, weighing, and risk. You pass a stall where a scribe is busy copying a contract, the parchment covered in names and numbers. Parents cluster nearby, their faces intent, scanning columns that track dowries, land parcels, and livestock, as if love were a sum that could be balanced. You hear the low murmur of mothers arguing the worth of their daughter's skills, a father extolling his son's good health, broad shoulders, or the small plot of land he will inherit. There's little talk of affection or dreams. Instead, every conversation turns on negotiation, the number of silver coins, the size of the chest, the quality of the linens, each weighed against the uncertainties of the future. A sudden commotion pulls your attention to a raised platform at the edge of the square. A young woman stands atop it, shoulders squared and jaw set, while a crowd listens as her virtues are listed in the rapid, practiced voice of an auctioneer. Around her, other women wait their turn, eyes fixed on the cobblestones, hands twisting the strings of their aprons. You realise with a start that you're watching an open marriage market, a practice not limited to one region or era, but echoed in countless cultures, from the bride auctions of Babylon to public courtships in the English countryside. Here, reputation is currency, and every eye in the crowd is both judge and potential bidder. A wealthy merchant steps forward, examining the young woman with a gaze that flickers between interest and calculation. He speaks with her father, his words quiet, but you sense the weight behind them. There are negotiations about the dowry, but also about what skills she brings. Can she sew, manage a household, produce healthy children? The merchant's wife, standing a step behind, studies the girl's face, searching for signs of virtue, obedience, or hidden rebellion. Not every marriage is struck with such ceremony. In a shadowed alley, you catch the hurried whispers of a different transaction. Here, a deal is being made quickly, almost furtively, no platform, no audience, just two families desperate to secure a future before bad luck or gossip makes it impossible. There is a quiet urgency, the sense that one misstep, one broken promise, could send the whole arrangement crumbling. For these families, the market is not a place of triumph, but of survival. A group of boys run past, laughing as they carry a bouquet of wildflowers and a bottle of sour wine. You follow them to the edge of a small courtyard where a different tradition plays out. The wedding is not arranged, but captured, a bride carried away in mock abduction, friends and neighbours cheering as she's whisked into a house where the kidnappers are really her beloved and his friends. The act is half ritual, half prank, but for some it's a loophole in a system that offers few choices. If a match is not approved, sometimes it's easier to pretend it was forced, letting families save face and join together over spilled wine and staged outrage. You move past a cluster of girls, their laughter bright and nervous, as they compare the charms hidden in their sleeves, coins for luck, threads for fertility, tiny amulets to ward off jealousy. One girl confides her fear that she'll be matched to a man she's never met. Another admits she hopes for a stranger rather than a cousin, if only for the chance to leave home. The conversation turns to stories of bridal switches, sisters swapped at the last moment, a veil lifted to reveal not the promised bride, but her younger sibling. These tales are told half in jest, half in warning, each one a reminder that the line between fortune and misfortune is thin as a bridal veil. Further down the lane, you pass a house with music pouring out the open windows. Inside, a wedding feast is in full swing. The tables groan under platters of food, pitchers of sweet wine, and pyramids of fruit. The couple at the head table looks tired but content, their hands linked loosely as relatives toast to their future. Here too, the marriage was arranged, the match approved after weeks of negotiation, but the celebration is genuine, the sense of community strong. For a night at least, everyone is on the same side. You pause at the threshold, watching the dance begin. The bride's shoes are new, the groom's robe freshly pressed. As they move, you notice the quick subtle glances between them, the way they check to see if the other is smiling. Some matches, you realise, will find affection and partnership in time, even if the spark is slow to catch. For others, the wedding is simply a beginning, a leap into an unknown that may never soften or warm. Outside, an old woman sells small bottles of rosewater and handfuls of almond sweets. She tells you that in her youth, marriages were sealed with a handshake and a blessing. Nothing more. She laughs when you ask if it was better then, shrugging her shoulders and saying every generation thinks the last had it easier, though the names and dowries change. She gestures at the girls passing by, veils fluttering, and says that each must find her own way through the market, with hope or cunning or just a bit of luck. As the night deepens, the market empties, stalls packed away, lists and ledgers tucked beneath cloaks. You walk the now quiet square, the echoes of bargains and promises trailing behind you. The sense lingers that for all its peculiar customs and pressures, the marriage market is more than just a place of transaction. It's also a stage for hope, disappointment, and the endless human urge to connect, even in the most unlikely circumstances. You wander on, your steps guided by the faint sound of music and laughter still drifting from open windows. A reminder that every bargain struck here is also the beginning of a story whose ending no one can truly predict. You move onward, letting the echoes of the marriage market fade behind you as the city transforms once more. The lamps are fewer here, and the streets twist in unexpected ways, the buildings leaning in close as if eager to exchange secrets. You become aware of something different in the air, not just the pulse of commerce or celebration, but the quiet, insistent energy of defiance. Here, fashion no longer merely signals wealth or status. It has become a weapon, a code, a way to challenge or escape the structures that hold people in place. You pass a group gathered in the shadows of an arched gateway. They speak in low voices, glancing over their shoulders, dressed in a palette that is both deliberate and bold. The flash of crimson at a collar, the forbidden shimmer of silk beneath a plain cloak, the careful drape of a sash. These are messages meant for those who know how to read them. You learn quickly that the laws dictating what one can or cannot wear, called sumptuary laws, are written less to guide than to control. Across centuries and cultures, rulers have sought to regulate fashion with an iron fist, fearing that too much luxury in the wrong hands could upset the natural order. A boy hurries past, his shoes dusted with gold pigment that he tries, and fails, to hide beneath a layer of dirt. He explains, almost sheepish, that the city's elders have forbidden commoners from wearing such colours, reserving them for those deemed worthy by birth or appointment. Still, a little gold has found its way to him, traded in secret for a favour, a story, a risk. It's a small act of rebellion, but it carries the thrill of danger. You realise that, in this world, to dress beyond your station is to invite suspicion, gossip, or worse. As you wind through alleys, you overhear whispered tales of tailors punished for sewing velvet sleeves for the wrong customers, of merchants fined for selling imported lace without the proper licence, of noblewomen smuggling pearls to friends who wish to taste the forbidden shimmer, even if only in a hidden room. Each act, however small, is a challenge to the laws that attempt to make outward appearance a reflection of inward obedience. You come upon a gathering in a candlelit cellar. The atmosphere is charged with anticipation. At first, it seems like any other night, a crowd of friends sharing bread and news. But as the doors close and curtains are drawn, out come garments in colours officially banned for anyone but the elite. Rich purples, blazing scarlets, indigos dark as midnight. Someone produces a mask trimmed in gold wire, another ties on a sash heavy with silver coins. Laughter breaks the hush as people shed their everyday clothes and slip into identities that feel truer, somehow, than the ones they display for the world. A woman at the centre of the room addresses the group, her voice steady. She recounts the story of a friend fined and banished for wearing a gown deemed too extravagant for her station, even though she had sewn it herself from scraps and offcuts. The injustice stings, and you hear a promise, soft but fierce, that the next parade will be brighter, bolder, more impossible to ignore. Around her, others nod in agreement, determination in their eyes. The evening swells with song, toasts, and the quiet click of needles as new seams are stitched into future acts of quiet protest. Outside, the streets bear their own witness to defiance. A row of bright ribbons tied to a fence marks the path of a clandestine procession that took place the night before. No permission granted, no official attendance, but the city woke to find its drabness interrupted by colour and creativity. The authorities are already out searching for the culprits, but the ribbons remain, fluttering defiantly in the morning breeze. You pass through a market where traders speak in code, offering cabbages that are really dyed silks, candles that are lengths of forbidden trim. Some customers haggle openly while others make subtle gestures, careful not to draw the attention of the city watch. You overhear a merchant explaining how to hide a dangerous colour beneath a safer one, to reveal only a flash in the right company. It is a game of risk and wit, a dance played for pride and the hope of something better. There are dangers too. The city jail is not far, and more than one person you meet has spent a night or two behind its bars for the crime of dressing above their rank. You glimpse a young man released only this morning, his hair still dusted with perfumed powder. He shrugs off the memory, but you see the resolve in his eyes. For some, the cost of rebellion is high, but the price of conformity is higher still. As you wander through the city, you encounter people who use fashion to conceal as well as to reveal. A cloak may hide a secret message, a brooch may mark membership in a forbidden club, a hat tilted just so may signal an invitation to a gathering far from prying eyes. Fashion becomes a language, a set of signs and signals known only to those who risk learning them. In this world, the right garment can mean safety or exposure, solidarity or isolation. You linger at a doorway as a mother helps her daughter into a new dress. The girl's eyes are wide, her smile shy, as she smooths the unfamiliar fabric. It is her first time wearing a colour her family could not have afforded without the help of friends and a little deception. The moment is both joyful and tense, a celebration of resistance, a hope that the risk will pass unnoticed, or that, if it does not, the community will stand together. The city is restless, always shifting. Fashion, which once seemed merely ornamental, now feels like the battleground on which people test the limits of power, express their ambitions, and declare their loyalties. You sense that the next confrontation is never far away, a new law, a bolder act, a festival where the old rules are challenged and sometimes broken. As the night deepens, you see a final act of quiet rebellion, a lantern procession winding through the streets, each light encased in paper, dyed the colours most strictly forbidden by the city's rulers. The crowd is silent, determined, unafraid. The message is clear for those who understand. The right to choose, to express, to wear one's dreams and defiance for all to see. You watch the lights fade into the distance, feeling the surge of hope and courage that rises whenever people find small ways to resist. In this world of shifting laws and watchful eyes, fashion is never just about clothes. It is about possibility, about the hope that what you wear might one day change not just your fate, but the fate of all who come after you. Bunt Dount, 1531. The winding streets seem to take on a new energy as you find yourself drifting toward the city's quieter outskirts, where the air is scented with dried herbs and the corners of courtyards seem to hum with secrets. Here the usual chatter about fabric and finery gives way to low voices sharing stories of luck, fate, and the unknown. You sense quickly that fashion and marriage, in these neighbourhoods, are tied not only to status or rebellion, but to a thick web of superstitions and invisible dangers. You wander past open doorways and catch glimpses of amulets nailed above lintels, braids of garlic strung like jewellery, and little clay charms tucked behind window shutters. In the flickering light, an old woman stirs a pot of rosemary and lavender on her hearth, muttering words you don't recognise. Her granddaughter sits nearby, winding a red thread around her wrist, a family ritual meant to ward off the evil eye, and, perhaps more urgently, to keep unwanted suitors at bay. You realise that in a world where so much is beyond one's control, even the smallest gesture becomes a shield against misfortune. Your steps bring you to a courtyard where young people gather beneath a fig tree. A girl passes around a pouch filled with dried seeds and shards of bone, each said to offer protection or promise a good match. She ties a pouch to her belt, pressing it against her hip as if its presence alone could steer her future. Nearby, her friend burns a scrap of paper, whispering the name of a boy she secretly admires into the smoke. The others giggle, but no one stops her. They have all tried some version of this ritual, hoping to nudge fate just a little in their favour. A group of women sits in the shade, their hands busy embroidering wedding veils with tiny hidden symbols, a fish for fertility, a crescent for luck, a spiral to confuse wandering spirits. They trade stories about the strange remedies passed down through their families, potions brewed from rose petals and honey, or charms fashioned from coins and bits of iron, meant to keep rival brides or malicious in-laws at bay. Some smile as they share their tales, others glance over their shoulders, wary of being overheard by those who would scorn or punish such practices. You notice how the boundaries between superstition and ceremony are blurred. At one house, the family prepares for a marriage by scattering salt across the threshold, drawing protective signs on the door, and tucking sprigs of rue into the folds of the bride's gown. An elder insists that no shoes be placed upside down, no needles left threaded overnight, and that the wedding date be set only after consulting the stars. To outsiders, these rituals may seem strange, but here they are a vital part of keeping chaos at bay. As the evening cools, you follow the faint sound of music and laughter to the centre of a small square where a wedding celebration is underway. The bride's hair is woven with ribbons and coins, each one a talisman, while her dress shimmers with tiny bells that jingle with every step. The groom's cloak is pinned with a cluster of dried herbs, meant to bring courage and ward off jealousy. You realise that, in this place, fashion is more than appearance. It is a line of defence against a world full of unseen hazards. As you mingle with the guests, you hear tales of charms slipped into wedding cakes, love potions brewed by hopeful parents, and old rivalries settled with a whispered curse or a well-timed blessing. One woman recalls how her own wedding was nearly ruined by a neighbour's jealousy, only to be saved by a last-minute ritual involving burning sage and 3 loops around the garden. Another confides that her marriage began with a dream, interpreted by her aunt as a sign that she should never remove her wedding ring, not even to wash her hands, lest misfortune slip in. You pass a table where a group of men are sharing a drink, their conversation turning to stories of marriages made and broken by fate. One swears that his wife's love was won by a charm sewn into his coat lining. Another claims his union was doomed from the start because the matchmaker ignored the warnings of a local wise woman. Their laughter is rueful, tinged with a recognition that sometimes the forces at play are beyond human understanding or control. Throughout the night, you notice small rituals repeated everywhere. A bride touching iron before leaving her father's house, a groom slipping a coin into his shoe, guests tossing handfuls of grain or petals over the couple's heads, as they walk together for the first time. Each gesture is both hope and insurance, a way to tip the scales toward happiness and away from heartbreak. Later, you find yourself in a darkened kitchen where an elderly woman prepares a potion in silence. Her shelves are lined with jars of dried roots, feathers and stones, each labelled in careful handwriting. She offers you a cup of something sweet and spicy, explaining that it will bring restful dreams and, if the spirits are willing, a glimpse of your future beloved. The taste is unfamiliar, but comforting, and you feel the gentle reassurance of generations who have turned to small magics in uncertain times. You return to the courtyard beneath the fig tree, where the wedding guests are beginning to drift home, carrying their charms and their hopes with them into the night. The moon is high, silvering the rooftops and casting long shadows. In the hush that settles after the laughter, you realise how deeply these rituals shape the rhythm of life here, how every marriage, every dress, every token is woven with meaning, part armour, part prayer. You walk on, passing under doorways marked with salt and rosemary, your senses attuned to the quiet power of belief. In these streets, superstition and love are partners, sometimes uneasy, sometimes inseparable, shaping destinies as surely as any king or law ever could. You cross from the hush of superstition into the solemn hush of mourning, where the city's rhythms slow and the atmosphere changes. The air grows heavy with incense, and the light is dimmed by gauzy drapes that hang over doorways and windows. Here the rituals of dress and marriage linger even in death, and you realise that fashion is not just for the living, but for the journey beyond as well. You find yourself in a quiet home, where preparations are underway for a funeral. The family moves with reverence, voices low as they select garments for the departed. The body is washed and anointed, then dressed with a care that borders on devotion. A shroud is chosen, sometimes simple linen, sometimes a fabric woven with gold thread or intricate patterns that tell the story of a life. Jewellery is placed around the neck, amulets tucked beneath folds, rings slid onto fingers. Every item is selected not just for beauty, but for meaning and protection in the afterlife. You notice that in many cultures, this attention to dress does not end with burial. In ancient Egypt, the dead were adorned with elaborate wigs, cosmetics, and gold amulets, all meant to help them face the trials of the next world. Priests would recite spells over the wrappings, ensuring that each layer of cloth was precisely positioned. The air in the tomb is thick with the smell of resin and myrrh, and as you imagine yourself in that chamber, you sense the quiet weight of generations watching, each hoping their own loved ones would be cared for as well. Moving from tomb to tomb in your wanderings, you witness how even in the afterlife, social standing mattered. Pharaohs and nobles were wrapped in robes spun from the finest linen, embroidered with prayers and protective signs. Their burial masks were fashioned to present them as eternally young and serene, while gold sandals and intricate jewellery proclaimed their status for eternity. For others, more modest funerals took place, but even the poorest families tried to provide something: a favourite cloak, a scrap of coloured cloth, a bead or token, so their beloved would not enter the next world empty-handed. Outside, a funeral procession winds slowly through the city streets. The mourners are draped in sombre garments, some in black, others in white or grey depending on custom. The head of the procession carries a staff entwined with flowers, while musicians play a slow, mournful tune. You follow at a respectful distance, noting how the procession pauses at each crossroads, how neighbours place offerings of bread, fruit or coins at the path's edge, wishing the dead safe passage. The garments of the living, too, mark their grief, cloaks unadorned, jewellery set aside, hair covered as a sign of sorrow and respect. In the heart of a grand necropolis, artisans carve and paint scenes of wedding feasts and family gatherings onto the walls of tombs. In these images, the deceased is always dressed in their finest, surrounded by loved ones, the scene echoing both celebration and farewell. Sometimes the depictions are so vivid, that you almost feel the laughter and music are just about to start. You understand then that fashion here is both memory and hope, a way to send messages to those left behind, and to whatever gods may be listening. You pass through a smaller, humbler burial ground, where the community comes together to honour a life ended too soon. The mourners gather around the grave, each laying a single flower or a scrap of ribbon on the fresh earth. A mother weeps quietly as she presses a child's favourite toy, carefully cleaned and wrapped, into the arms of the tiny figure before the earth is closed. There is a gentleness here, a deep and wordless care that lingers longer than any formal ritual. As dusk falls, you join a group of women gathered around a low table, sewing together burial garments for those without family. Their hands are practiced, their faces serene as they share memories of loved ones gone. They speak softly of the importance of providing for the dead, of ensuring that everyone, regardless of wealth, is remembered with dignity and grace. The conversation drifts from lost husbands and sisters to legends of those who returned in dreams to thank them for a beautiful shroud or a remembered prayer. You find yourself at a funeral feast, where the atmosphere has shifted. Here the mourners celebrate the departed with music, laughter and stories, everyone dressed in their best as a final gesture of respect. Platters of food are passed, toasts are raised, and guests recount moments of kindness, bravery, or mischief. The clothes worn tonight will be folded away afterward, set aside for another day of parting, but for now they shimmer in candlelight, reminders of how beauty can persist even in sadness. Later, you follow a procession into a temple, where priests burn incense and recite ancient hymns. The statues on the altar are robed in dazzling textiles, some changed seasonally, some given as offerings in gratitude or petition. You learn that clothing is not only for people, but for gods and spirits as well, each piece crafted with as much devotion as any mortal could hope to receive. As the night deepens, you wander among tombstones, feeling the presence of those who have gone before. You notice scraps of cloth tied to branches, beads threaded through iron fences, and painted stones placed atop grave markers, small acts of remembrance, tokens to say, you are not forgotten. The moon rises high, silvering the world, and you sense the comfort that comes from knowing that, even in death, care and memory endure. You continue your journey, the scent of incense and the softness of linen lingering as you walk. Fashion, you see, is not just about attracting admiration or turning heads. It is also about honouring, grieving, and holding on to love long after voices fall silent. You find yourself moving through a corridor lit by the blue haze of dawn, where the city's boundaries blur and the usual order of things is quietly questioned. Here, amid columns and tapestries, you sense a spirit of transformation at work, not just in fabric and finery, but in the very rules that have long dictated who may be what, and who may love whom. As you follow the gentle shuffle of footsteps, you discover the places and people where gender itself becomes fluid, expressed and concealed through clever choices of dress. In a bright chamber, sunlight glances off polished mirrors and painted screens. A young servant helps a noblewoman don a set of military armour, each piece buckled tight, and every strand of hair hidden beneath a plumed helmet. Her movements are practised, her posture upright and commanding. Today she will appear before the court not as herself, but as a brother lost to war, fulfilling a duty only men are meant to bear. Her disguise is flawless, down to the embroidered cuffs and polished boots that signal her status. You see in her face a mixture of apprehension and resolve, knowing her life depends on passing through this day unnoticed. Each detail of her attire is both a shield and a gamble, a statement that challenges and protects. In another part of the city, a young man sits patiently as his mother pins his hair and wraps him in silks, embroidered with flowers and phoenixes. The transformation is delicate and deliberate. Tonight he will dance in the temple, performing rites traditionally reserved for priestesses. His face is carefully painted, his gestures practiced until they seem effortless. He holds himself with quiet pride, aware that his family's reputation, and perhaps their safety, ride on how convincingly he can become what is needed. For some, these moments are necessity. For others, they are opportunity, a space to express truths that society usually keeps hidden. You pass through royal halls hung with portraits of queens who once donned soldiers' uniforms to ride into battle, or of emperors whose private wardrobes included the finest silks and veils, worn only behind closed doors. History is full of rulers who blurred the lines of gender, sometimes for love, sometimes for power, always with consequences. You hear the story of an empress who ruled in secret for years, her identity revealed only in death, when her burial clothes were found to be both bridal and martial, a testament to a life lived in defiance of simple categories. In a busy kitchen, servants prepare for a wedding unlike any you have seen. The couple, both women, stand before a small circle of trusted friends. One wears a suit tailored to fit her frame, while the other wears a flowing gown in midnight blue. The seamstress who made these garments watches with pride, knowing she has risked her livelihood to support this union. The ceremony is simple, the vows spoken quietly, but every detail of their attire is chosen with care, each button, each stitch, an act of courage in a world that demands conformity. You notice, too, the quieter rebellions. A group of artists gather at a tavern, each dressed in a mix of styles, tunics and trousers, skirts and sashes, colours and fabrics that resist easy classification. They laugh and debate, swapping clothes, trying on new selves for an evening or a lifetime. In their company, you sense the freedom that comes from refusing to be pinned down, the joy in inventing a wardrobe to match the spirit within. The city's theatre is alive with anticipation as you slip inside, joining a crowd eager for a new performance. On stage, actors move seamlessly between roles, changing costumes with dazzling speed, today a king, tomorrow a queen, sometimes both within the same scene. The audience delights in the transformations, their applause a rare moment of acceptance for lives often hidden in shadow. Backstage, the actors whisper advice to each other, sharing the secrets of makeup and posture, how to walk, speak and hold the eye, so that the illusion becomes real, if only for an hour. You pause in a sunlit courtyard, where elders share stories of ancestors who flouted gender expectations in their own ways. One remembers a grandmother who dressed as a man to escape a forced marriage. Another tells of a beloved uncle who embroidered his own wedding veil in secret, only to reveal it years later as a treasured heirloom. Their voices are gentle, their laughter fond, and you feel the quiet strength that comes from generations of adaptation and resilience. As you wander through these spaces, you see how the strict codes of dress have always been challenged, bent, and sometimes broken by those determined to live authentically. For some, cross-dressing is a strategy of survival, for others an act of love, and for a few, simply the most honest way to exist. The city is full of watchers, some curious, some suspicious, but many quietly supportive. A baker slips a fresh loaf into the hands of a disguised bride, a blacksmith offers a wink to a boy in borrowed silks, and a musician composes a melody that is played at every gathering where the usual rules are suspended, if only for a night. The sky shifts toward evening as you find yourself at the edge of a garden, where a small group gathers around a table, spread with food and wine. Here, stories are told in whispers and laughter, secrets shared and understood. You realize that the right garment can open doors or close them forever, that a single night dressed as someone else can change the course of a life. Before you leave, an older man presses a ring into your palm. It once belonged to someone who dared to live in the spaces between, he tells you, a quiet reminder that the most lasting legacies are often those that challenge what is expected. You slip the ring on, feeling the weight of its history, and continue your walk, your steps lighter, your eyes open to the shimmering variety of ways people have chosen to dress, love, and belong. Your steps take you next into the solemn grandeur of sacred halls, where the air is thick with incense, and the patterns of sunlight filtered through stained glass or carved screens paint shifting mosaics on the floor. Here, the rules of dress and marriage are inscribed not only in law, but in the language of faith. Priests move silently past, their robes trailing over ancient stone, the colours and cuts determined centuries before by scripture, tradition, and the dictates of unseen powers. You begin to sense how deeply religion has shaped not only what people wear, but who they marry, and how those unions are blessed or forbidden. You linger at the entrance to a temple, where initiates don plain, unadorned garments, their humility shown in the simplicity of their dress. As they enter, the high priest blesses each one, sprinkling water from a gilded bowl and murmuring words meant to purify both body and intention. You watch as a bride-to-be kneels at the altar, her veil pale and unembellished, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For her, this ceremony is not just a personal passage, but a public affirmation of virtue, a declaration that she is worthy in the eyes of the gods and the community alike. Within these walls, every thread carries meaning. Certain colours are reserved for holy days, particular patterns restricted to those who have completed rituals or made pilgrimages. In some traditions, only the married may wear particular tokens, rings woven from grass, bracelets of silver, or garlands of sacred flowers. You see a couple exchange such tokens in a quiet side chapel, their eyes meeting shyly as the priest intones blessings that have echoed through the generations. You follow the flow of worshippers through the temple, noting how the sacred and the everyday are woven together. In some places, strict codes require women to cover their heads or faces, while men must wrap themselves in special shawls or belts before entering holy spaces. A child tugs at your sleeve, explaining with grave authority which fabrics are considered pure and which must be avoided. You realise how early these lessons begin, and how deeply they mark both identity and belonging. Outside the temple, a wedding party gathers beneath an arch of flowers. The couple stands surrounded by elders, their clothing meticulously chosen for the occasion. The bride's gown is embroidered with symbols meant to invoke fertility and happiness, while the groom's tunic bears motifs of strength and protection. The priest, resplendent in ceremonial vestments, leads the gathering in prayers and songs. Each gesture, each word, is choreographed to bind the union not only in law, but in spirit, under the gaze of ancestors and deities alike. You notice how closely the rituals of marriage are tied to the rules of dress. In some faiths, marriage is only permitted between those of the same belief, the ceremony itself impossible without the proper garments and blessings. In others, clothing is used to mark forbidden unions, with certain colours or patterns reserved for those considered outcasts. You hear whispers of secret marriages conducted at night, the couple disguised in borrowed robes. The risks great, but the hope of acceptance greater still. In another quarter of the city, you pass a synagogue where the rules are just as exacting. Men wear fringed garments as reminders of the commandments. Women drape shawls over their shoulders, their heads bowed in quiet reverence. A scribe explains to you how even undergarments are marked with blessings, each stitch a prayer against temptation and misfortune. The marriage contract, carefully written and witnessed, is read aloud, the signatures inked with hands that tremble slightly at the weight of the moment. You enter a mosque at midday, your feet bare on cool tiles, the faithful gathered in neat rows. Here simplicity reigns, white robes, clean and undecorated, the only requirement for those who stand together in prayer. Yet, for weddings, new clothes are pressed and perfumed, the bride's hands stained with henna in elaborate designs that take hours to complete. You are told how, in some families, the wedding dress is kept for a lifetime, worn again for each child's birth or for moments of mourning, connecting joy and sorrow in a single thread. As you leave, you encounter a group of children learning the stories of saints and prophets. They listen wide-eyed as the teacher describes a wedding where the choice of fabric foretold a future filled with peace, or a garment so blessed that it could heal wounds simply by touch. The children giggle at the idea of magical clothing, but you see in their eyes the seeds of belief, a reverence for the power woven into everyday things. Even outside the formalities of worship, the influence of religion persists. You notice neighbours exchanging bread and salt with newlyweds, families inscribing blessings above doorways, and older women whispering prayers as they spin and dye wool for bridal trousseau. Faith infuses every stage of life, its invisible threads holding together what is seen and unseen, spoken and unspoken. As night falls and the city's sacred spaces empty, you walk beneath the lingering scents of incense and oil, aware of the comfort and the constraint that religious rules bring. In this world, to dress or to marry is not just a personal choice, but a communal act, shaped by the expectations of gods, ancestors, and those yet to be born. You sense how these ancient codes endure, guiding hands and hearts long after the candles are snuffed and the prayers have faded into silence. You drift now into a district alive with the murmur of anticipation, where the routines of daily life are punctuated by moments of sharp surprise. This is the part of the city where the careful scripts of fashion and marriage sometimes unravel, giving way to the unexpected, the chaotic, and the deeply human. Here, mishaps and misunderstandings leave their mark as surely as pearls sewn onto velvet, and even the most powerful are not immune to a well-timed accident, or the relentless churn of rumour. The first scene you encounter is a wedding thrown into confusion by a sudden downpour. Guests, dressed in their finest silks and brocades, scatter beneath makeshift awnings. The bride's carefully coiffed hair collapses, the groom's shoes sink in the mud, and the lavish feast threatens to wash away before the couple can even exchange vows. Yet there is laughter beneath the groans, a sense that imperfection itself is woven into the tradition. Older guests reminisce about weddings past, one where the bride fainted and had to be revived with a splash of cold water, another where a groom's borrowed tunic split at the seams mid-dance, exposing more than just ambition. Inside a narrow home, you come upon a family in the midst of a wardrobe disaster. The bride's dress, meant to be a masterpiece of lace and embroidery, has arrived from the seamstress in the wrong colour entirely. Aunts and cousins gather around, debating whether it can be dyed, reworked or disguised with ribbons and flowers. The bride sits quietly, her eyes bright with tears and laughter, as the women transform disaster into creativity. They turn the mishap into a story she will tell for years, proof that joy can survive even the collapse of careful planning. In a shadowed courtyard, you witness a different sort of confusion. Two families, both proud and stubborn, have arranged a marriage only to discover on the day itself that a mix-up has occurred, the wrong sister stands in the bridal veil, the right groom is nowhere to be found. Voices rise in a chorus of blame and protest, yet even amid the uproar, an elder steps forward to smooth things over with a joke and a prayer. Agreements are remade, laughter bubbles up, and the celebration continues, the details already blurring into legend. You hear stories whispered in doorways about so-called ghost weddings, unions between the living and the dead, arranged to settle debts or appease restless spirits. In one home, a young woman sits before a portrait of a fiancé lost before the wedding day. She is dressed in white, flanked by solemn relatives who murmur blessings over a ritual meal. The clothes, the rings, the gestures all follow tradition, but the air is thick with longing and uncertainty. These ceremonies, though rare, linger in memory as poignant reminders of the ways people try to mend the unmendable, to bind together what fate has torn apart. On another street, the city prepares for a festival known for its outrageous costumes and theatrical pranks. Here, the lines between fashion, disguise, and mockery blur completely. Revellers don extravagant outfits that parody the nobility, the clergy, even each other. You watch as a young couple, having eloped without their family's consent, reappear at the festival disguised as masked jesters. Their secret is safe in the chaos, their union blessed by laughter and applause rather than formality. Back indoors, you join a group of tailors and seamstresses, trading stories of their greatest triumphs and worst nightmares. They remember the year a noble's sleeve caught fire from a careless candle, the time a queen's crown slipped and knocked her veil askew just as she entered the cathedral, the way a single stubborn button refused to hold fast no matter how many times it was sewn. Each tale is told with a mixture of pride and relief, the unspoken knowledge that perfection is always pursued, rarely achieved. You find yourself at a banquet where the conversation is dominated by rumours, who wore last year's fashion, who was caught switching places with a sibling, which marriage was arranged in haste to avoid scandal. The stories multiply, gaining details and losing accuracy with each retelling. For every misfortune, someone offers a blessing. For every disaster, a toast is raised in hope of better days to come. Late at night, you walk through a nearly deserted square where a lone musician plays beneath a flickering lamp. His audience is a couple whose wedding was delayed by everything from a missing priest to a runaway goat. They dance slowly, shoes muddy, clothes askew, but their laughter is warm and free. In their eyes you see the truth that underlies every fashion and every ceremony, that what matters most survives the failure of even the grandest plans. As you leave, the city is quiet again, but you carry with you the echoes of these near misses, mishaps, and surprises. You realise that for all the rules and rituals meant to impose order, the most memorable moments are often born of accident, mistake, or defiant joy. The tapestry of fashion and marriage, however tightly woven, is always full of loose threads, and sometimes it is these threads that catch the light, that make the story unforgettable. The city is stirring with a different kind of energy now, a thrum that feels both urgent and electric. You move through avenues thick with conversation, where the old patterns of dress and marriage are coming undone. The air is charged with talk of revolution, of social order overturned, of new possibilities that once seemed unthinkable. Here, fashion and matrimony are no longer simply matters of tradition or obedience, but become tools for challenging the world as it is, for making something radically new. You pass by a group gathered beneath a statue, their clothes a riot of borrowed and repurposed finery. One young woman wears her grandmother's velvet cloak over a man's breeches and a ribbon in the colour of a forbidden cause. Her friends sport patched coats and hats trimmed with feathers and sashes that declare allegiance to new ideals. They are not just dressed for celebration, they are dressed for defiance, for the statement that the rules have changed, that identity is theirs to shape. The conversation is sharp and full of hope. You hear talk of wedding contracts written on the backs of revolutionary pamphlets, of love matches made public to scandalise the guardians of the old ways. Further along, you find a tailor's shop with its doors flung wide. Inside, apprentices work through the night, sewing uniforms for rebel fighters alongside wedding dresses for couples determined to wed in the chaos. The city's divisions spill into every seam and stitch. A young woman helps her partner into a borrowed jacket with brass buttons, pinning a scrap of ribbon at the collar. They laugh as they practice their vows, promising loyalty in a world where even tomorrow is uncertain. Their friends gather around, some to bear witness, others to stand guard, all aware that these acts, of dressing, of pledging love, are themselves forms of quiet resistance. You sense the fragility of the moment. From the rooftops comes the distant sound of shouts, of crowds gathering in the central square. Word spreads that a law has been struck down, that families long divided by old rules are being reunited. You follow the surge of people, drawn by the sense that history is being written with every step. In the heart of the city, a parade winds forward. Men and women march together, some arm in arm, some hand in hand, their clothes mismatched and glorious. There are old uniforms torn and resewn, wedding dresses dyed in the colours of a new flag, children wrapped in shawls and scarves emblazoned with slogans of hope. You pause as an elder climbs the steps of the old courthouse. She is dressed in the full regalia of her youth, a gown heavy with embroidery, a sash for each year of peace, a crown set with stones from across the generations. Her voice carries through the crowd as she tells the story of her own forbidden marriage, of how she and her beloved had once worn disguises, hidden their names, risked everything for the promise of a future together. Now, she says, her family stands with her in daylight, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. You wander the city as the night deepens and fires are lit in celebration and remembrance. People gather in small groups around tables piled with food and wine, their stories blending and clashing. Here, an old man lifts a toast to the memory of days when a single wrong colour could mean exile. There, a young bride weeps as she removes the veil that was once a mark of shame, now a symbol of triumph. The air is thick with music and memory, and everywhere you look, boundaries are dissolving. At a corner, you spot a young couple sitting together, heads close, their fingers entwined. The woman's dress is patched and faded, but around her neck gleams a necklace that belonged to her great-grandmother, a gift once denied her because of a forbidden love. The man wears a jacket too large for his frame, the name of a distant city stitched inside the collar, a legacy of travel, risk, and survival. They smile quietly, watching the parade go by, knowing their union is both ordinary and extraordinary in this shifting new world. Not all changes come without pain. There are hushed voices in doorways, families arguing about what to keep and what to let go. You hear stories of lovers parted by the tides of war, of marriages broken by the demands of new allegiances, of friendships strained by fear and hope in equal measure. Yet even in these moments of sorrow, there is a sense of possibility, the knowledge that tomorrow might bring a fresh chance, a new beginning. In the candlelit rooms of the city's grandest houses, old portraits are quietly taken down, the faces of long-gone ancestors replaced by new icons and images. Tailors who once measured every hem and sleeve to the dictates of a distant court now experiment with wild new styles, mixing fabrics and shapes in ways that would have scandalized previous generations. Children dash through the streets wearing ribbons and scraps of velvet, their laughter ringing out in the night. You find yourself invited to a wedding that begins at midnight. The guests arrive in all manner of dress, some still in the uniforms of a vanished army, others in borrowed finery, others barefoot, flowers twined in their hair. The ceremony is simple, the vows spoken softly in the presence of friends and strangers alike. The couple exchange rings made from twisted wire and beads, each gesture suffused with the weight of history and the brightness of hope. When the music begins, they dance together beneath a skylight with fireworks and the wild, joyful promise of freedom. As dawn approaches, the city quiets once more. You walk through streets littered with ribbons and petals, hearing in the hush the memory of vows taken, rules rewritten, futures claimed against the odds. In every corner you see how fashion and marriage, once weapons of control, have become languages of change, tools for self-expression, and symbols of the longing for a world remade. You pause at the edge of a square, watching the light spill across stone and fabric, old and new mingling as the city breathes out, exhausted and exhilarated. The story continues, you sense, in every hand that threads a needle, every heart that dares to choose, every step that carries someone into a tomorrow shaped by courage and love. The city feels softer as dawn stretches over its rooftops, the last of the night's energy gently dissolving into calm. You move through streets that seem quieter now, each corner touched by the golden hush of early morning. The sounds of celebration and rebellion have faded, and what lingers is the quiet aftermath. Silk ribbons caught on railings, petals drifting in the gutters, laughter and tears echoing faintly in the still air. There's a sense that something important has unfolded, and now it is time to rest and reflect. You walk along a colonnade where last night's banners hang limp, their bright colours muted in the pale light. The shops are shuttered, their displays of shoes and jewels and fine fabrics hidden for a few hours of peace. Here and there, a tailor dozzes against a doorway, a seamstress wraps herself in a half-finished cloak. The city's great clock tolls once, a sound so deep it seems to reach into your chest and slow your heartbeat. Everything feels gentler, as if the city itself is exhaling. You notice the little details left behind, thread caught on a fence, a scrap of veil clinging to the steps of the old courthouse, faint imprints of dance steps in a patch of dust. In the silence, these remnants are like a soft conversation between the past and the present, proof that every wild moment, every bold gesture and quiet hope leaves a mark that time will not fully erase. You sense that you are not alone in your wandering. Other quiet figures drift through the morning, each lost in their thoughts, each carrying the stories of the night like delicate treasures. You find yourself drawn to a small bridge arching over a stream that cuts through the heart of the city. The water moves slowly, carrying petals and fragments of dreams out toward a horizon barely touched by the sun. You stand there for a while, breathing in the cool air, feeling the gentle promise of another day. Beneath the bridge, the stones are carved with names, some so old they are nearly worn away, others fresh, the letters sharp and certain. You imagine the hands that carved them, the wishes whispered as each name was etched into stone. As you move on, you pass a courtyard where someone has laid out garments to dry in the new light. The colours are faded, but you recognise the shapes: a wedding gown, a child's small shirt, a shawl once draped over an honoured elder's shoulders. Each piece holds a story, woven through with the joys and sorrows, the bargains and rebellions, the promises made in hushed voices and shouted to the sky. You realise how much has been risked in the name of love, and how even the smallest choices, a ribbon, a ring, a word spoken at midnight, can change the course of many lives. At the edge of a quiet square, you pause to watch the slow procession of people beginning their day. There is no rush, only a kind of reverent fatigue, as if everyone feels the weight of what has passed. A mother straightens her daughter's headscarf before sending her off to fetch bread. An old man polishes his boots before joining friends for morning prayers. A young couple share a quiet moment, fingers entwined, before they must part for work. These gestures are ordinary and precious, the continuation of stories centuries in the making. You find a spot beneath a flowering tree, petals drifting around you in the softest breeze. Here you settle down, your muscles relaxing into the earth, your breath slowing to match the gentle rhythm of the city at rest. You reflect on all you have witnessed, the extremes of beauty and pain, the desperate need to belong, the quiet defiance that pulses beneath every choice. You realise that fashion and marriage are not only about fabric or ceremony, but about identity, longing, the need to be seen and cherished in a world that is always changing. In the hush of morning, you feel the city begin to stir once more. A child's laughter rings out, distant and bright. Somewhere a bell chimes, and doors begin to open. The old rituals return, the daily pageant resumes, but now with a new layer of memory, stories added to the great tapestry of life. You understand that every generation must choose what to keep and what to let go, what to honour and what to gently set aside. The sun climbs a little higher, gilding rooftops and warming stone. You stand, stretching, feeling a deep peace in your bones. Whatever else may come, you know that the beauty, the strangeness, the courage and the tenderness you have seen will linger, not just in garments or ceremonies, but in the hearts of those who walk these streets, now and always. As you take one last slow walk through the city, you carry with you the gentle wisdom of the night, that we are all stitched together by our dreams, our hopes, our willingness to try again. You look up, letting the morning light settle on your face, and let the quiet strength of the city carry you forward, step by step, into the embrace of a new day. The world softens, the breeze cools your brow, and your eyelids grow heavy. The city fades behind you, becoming a gentle whisper, a memory wrapped in gold and midnight blue. Your heartbeat steadies, your breath deepens, and you know you are safe, held in the quiet weave of all the stories that came before. So now, with the first warmth of sun on your cheek, you can rest. The journey is done, and you are home, here, in the slow, timeless hush that waits for you just before sleep. Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where the shadows seem thicker, the air heavier with old perfume, and even your heartbeat sounds like it's echoing off marble columns and ancient walls. You find yourself wandering a narrow street in a city you can't quite place. Could be could be Rome, or maybe it's Cairo, because the way the torches flicker and the market smells of frankincense, rosewater, and something suspiciously like feet, you know you're definitely not in Kansas. Your hand brushes against a stone wall worn smooth by centuries of silk sleeves and linen tunics. You pass a bronze mirror, catch a glimpse of yourself, and realise you're decked out in a get-up that would make your high school yearbook photo look positively tame, beads clacking at your neck, kohl smudged expertly around your eyes, and a belt that seems designed more for ritual than for. Holding up your pants. There's a man passing, his beard waxed into little curls, wrapped in a toga that looks like it's seen more political intrigue than your entire Instagram feed. Nearby, a woman's headdress towers above her like she's smuggling fruit or secrets, her sandals laced up past her knees, and you can't help but notice she's staring right back at you, judging your posture maybe, or your obvious discomfort in these clothes. A merchant offers you pomegranate seeds and insists they'll make your lips redder, your luck better, and your prospects in love considerably less hopeless. You take them, of course, because who can resist the pitch? Besides, the merchant's rings glitter in the firelight, and you get the sense they might know exactly what happened behind the closed doors of the ziggurat last night. Here's your one reality check. If you were actually here, walking the torchlit streets of Babylon or Athens, you probably wouldn't survive the night. Not with your shoes, not with your haircut, and definitely not with that modern attitude. Out here, fashion is armour, status, a kind of social GPS. Wear the wrong thing, and you risk everything. So, before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 am? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on Timeless Sleep. You push onward through the crowd, noticing how everyone seems locked in a silent competition to outdo one another. Every colour, every thread is a signal. In Mesopotamia, the purple dye in someone's robe could bankrupt a small village, but it would also let everyone know that they're just a little closer to the king, or at least hope you think so. Children scamper by in amulets shaped like fish, meant to ward off evil eyes and nosy neighbours alike. Somewhere a priest splashes oil on a statue, his robe's embroidery so intricate it could double as a map. If you looked closely, you might spot a symbol stitched there that marks him as a servant of Ishtar, and not the sun god Shamash. Wearing the wrong symbol isn't just a faux pas, it's a cosmic blunder, one that could haunt your family for generations. As you shuffle forward, a cool breeze cuts through the hot press of bodies. You catch a whisper about last week's scandal, a woman seen in public with her hair uncovered. Some call it bold, others blasphemy, but everyone's talking. Here, what you wear is more than fashion. It's a language. The Romans strut by, their togas arranged just so, folds sharp enough to slice. If your toga slips, your honour does too. There are rules, layers and knots that only insiders understand. There's always one guy who ties his in a way that hints he's secretly angling for higher office, or, worse, trying to pass as a senator when he's really just good at laundry. At the edge of the forum, you spot a small, tight cluster of young people. They're all in the newest style, tunics scandalously short, gold thread gleaming at the collar. The old guard glares from under heavy eyebrows, muttering about the youth today, but you notice how even they tug their sleeves down a bit, wishing maybe for a little gold thread of their own. A few paces away, a gladiator lumbers past, the scars on his legs barely visible under the silk bands, and you realise that in this world, even battle wounds become part of your ensemble. There's no such thing as a purely practical garment, everything's an advertisement, an ambition or a warning. You weave between a pair of merchants arguing over who has the better batch of Tyrian purple, and it's only when they both spot a noblewoman with her slaves trailing behind, her dress so stiff with pearls it probably stands up by itself, that the argument dies. Everyone bows their heads, but you see the way eyes flicker, taking mental notes for the next family gathering. Above, on a balcony, a flute player in a crimson robe, illegal for most, reserved for the priesthood, fills the air with a melody that sticks to your bones. Every time the wind shifts, you catch a new scent, cinnamon, wool, fresh fish, and something sweet, almost cloying, from the alleyway bakeries. You realise this isn't just a fashion show, it's survival. The wrong hem length could have the city guards questioning your status, and the wrong colour could see you dragged before the magistrate. Farther along, you slip through an archway into the Egyptian quarter. The sun beats down even at dusk, and the crowd here glows with golden jewellery and linen so sheer it's like wearing a breeze. You envy them until you notice a group huddled around a pot of something steaming, eyeliner they say, made from ground-up galena. They dab at their faces, sharing tips, laughing quietly, while a priestess explains that a thick line protects against both sun glare and the curse of jealous spirits. Overhead, the carved eyes of Horus stare down, eternal, and you understand that here, the gods are fashion critics too. Children dart through your path, their cheeks streaked with ochre and their wrists jangling with blue glass beads. A mother scolds her son for smudging his coal, then fusses over his new amulet, making sure it's displayed just so, because if it isn't, a neighbour might gossip. Or worse, blame her when the next sandstorm rolls in. You try not to laugh, but it's hard when you realise that some things never change. Even 3,000 years ago, people were desperate to keep up with their neighbours, terrified of being left out or left behind. You move with the crowd, always watching, always learning. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of something shocking. A man in a woman's headscarf, a woman wearing men's sandals, or a child in a mask shaped like a falcon. Each one is a tiny rebellion, a quiet dare, or maybe a bit of mischief before the grown-ups catch on. You realise that every society has its rule breakers and its rule makers, and the line between the two is thin as a thread of silk. A hush falls as the procession approaches. You step back as city officials glide past, their capes starched and stiff, trailing attendants who sprinkle flower petals with the solemnity of a sacred rite. The crowd presses forward, eager for a glimpse, and suddenly you're caught in a swirl of colour and sound, every eye sparkling with a mix of envy, admiration and calculation. This is more than fashion, it's magic, politics, religion and the weight of generations, all stitched together. As the crowd thins, you find yourself beside a faded mosaic, its tiles chipped but still gleaming in the lamplight. You trace the patterns with your fingers, feeling the pulse of history, how every civilization, from Babylon to Rome to Thebes, has used clothing to tell its story, hide its fears, and declare its hopes. The wind picks up again, tugging at your sleeve, and you wonder what stories your own clothes might tell if you let them. You keep walking, each step drawing you deeper into the heart of the night, through bazaars and back streets, where the boundaries between costume and identity blur. A group of musicians tunes up in a corner, their instruments as battered as their shoes, but their laughter is bright, sharp, and utterly fearless. Somewhere nearby, a fortune teller reads a stranger's fate in the weave of a scarf. And just when you think you might finally blend in, someone hands you a garland of flowers, tells you it brings luck, and winks, making you wonder if you're being welcomed, initiated, or just marked for the next great story. As you fade into the crowd, the city seems to sigh around you, alive with secrets, beauty, and danger. You pull your borrowed cloak a little tighter, feeling both exposed and protected, and realise that in this ancient, dazzling world, you're part of something bigger than yourself, a tapestry of hope, ambition and survival, stitched together one outrageous outfit at a time. You drift forward without noticing the moment the street narrows and the air cools, as if the city itself is guiding you somewhere quieter, more private. The noise of the marketplace fades into a distant murmur, replaced by the soft scrape of sandals on stone and the hush of voices trained not to carry. Ahead, a palace rises from the darkness, its walls pale and smooth, catching moonlight like still water. You don't question how you pass through the gates. In places like this, questions are rarely welcome, and curiosity is something you learn to wear carefully, like a borrowed ring that doesn't quite fit. Inside, the corridors stretch long and echoing, lined with painted reliefs of weddings that look nothing like the ones you know. Couples stand stiff and formal, hands barely touching, eyes fixed forward rather than on each other. You pause before one carving where the bride is clearly a child, her feet not even reaching the ground, her hair arranged in an elaborate style, meant to make her seem older, heavier, more substantial than she really is. Servants hover around her, adjusting jewellery that seems almost comically oversized, layers of gold and stone meant to announce something louder than her small voice ever could. You follow the sound of murmured negotiations into a side chamber where men sit in a loose circle, their robes heavy, their fingers busy with cups, scrolls and signet rings. Marriage here isn't whispered about in terms of love or compatibility. It's spoken of like land, like grain, like alliances that must be secured before the next drought or war. A father clears his throat and names the lineage of his daughter the way someone might list the features of a prized horse. Another man nods, calculating, already thinking 3 generations ahead. Somewhere beyond the walls, the bride herself waits, likely unaware of the precise terms being agreed upon in her name. You sense how normalized this all feels to them. Across civilizations, royal and noble marriages are treated as tools, instruments designed to bind families, secure borders, and silence rivals. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs often married within their own bloodline, believing divine power was something best kept pure and close. In royal courts from Mesopotamia to Europe, cousins became spouses, siblings became partners, and family trees folded inward on themselves until the lines blurred. It's strange, unsettling, but no one here flinches. To them, this is simply how the world stays balanced. As you move deeper into the palace, you glimpse the other side of these arrangements. In a candlelit room, a young queen sits alone, her wedding garments folded neatly beside her. The fabric is exquisite, linen so fine it seems spun from air, embroidery catching the light with every small movement, but her hands tremble slightly as she smooths a crease that doesn't need smoothing. She's been taught how to stand, how to speak, how to smile, just enough. No one has taught her how to want. Her marriage is tomorrow, and while the court celebrates, she counts the hours like beads slipping through her fingers. Elsewhere, celebration fills the halls. Courtiers laugh softly, musicians tune their instruments, and trays of food are prepared for a feast that will last until dawn. You pass a group of relatives, debating the seating arrangements with more intensity than you've ever seen applied to matters of the heart. Who sits closest to the couple matters. Who pours the wine matters. Every detail is a performance, designed to communicate stability and power to anyone watching closely enough. You step into a grand hall where a wedding ceremony is already underway. The groom stands tall, practiced in public appearances, his expression carefully neutral. His bride approaches, veiled and radiant, guided by attendants who keep her from stumbling under the weight of her garments. They do not look at each other. Instead, they look toward the priest, the altar, the witnesses. This union is not about two people discovering something new together. It is about confirming something old, something agreed upon long before either of them had a say. Your mind drifts briefly to how marriage works where you come from, how it's supposed to be built on choice, affection, shared dreams. Then you remember that even in your world, echoes of these older systems remain. Last names passed down, expectations inherited, subtle pressures disguised as tradition. The difference is often just how openly it's acknowledged. The ceremony ends with formal gestures rather than kisses. Applause ripples through the hall, polite and restrained. Gifts are presented: gold, land deeds, symbolic items meant to represent fertility and prosperity. No one asks the couple how they feel. The question would seem irrelevant, maybe even inappropriate. Feeling is private. Duty is public. Later, in a quieter wing of the palace, you overhear a hushed conversation between two older women. They speak of marriages past, of sisters sent away to foreign courts, of daughters who never returned. One woman adjusts her shawl and says softly that at least this marriage keeps the girl close to home. The other nods, eyes distant, and replies that sometimes closeness is its own kind of prison. Their voices drop as footsteps approach, and the moment dissolves back into silence. You wander onward, crossing centuries as easily as hallways. In medieval Europe, you find yourself in a cold stone castle where banners